Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Saturday Special. Today is the Remembrance Day and we remember the martyrs who lived up to their trust. The countries had placed their trust in them to protect the institutions and they laid down their life for trust. But in this world today, the biggest loss seems to be that there has been a death. And that death is not being lamented by anybody. That's the death of the trust. The world as a whole is suffering from a serious trust crisis. People talk of the economy, people talk of the defense, people talk of racism. But then don't you know that the lack of trust is a basic cause, or rather one of the major contributing causes for political and social fluidity. It's our institutions that protect us from that. And they also shield us from volatility and the costly shocks. It's a trust in the army that gives a moral boost to the army that protects our borders. It's a trust in the judiciary that gives a boost to the judiciary so that they've got to live up to that trust and give absolutely fair and impartial judgment. It's a trust, the blind trust in the institutions that helps us. But what we have seen is that today, when we look around, okay, you pose a question to yourself, do you trust those people around you? Do you trust your political leaders? Do you trust the government? Do you trust the financial system? Do you trust your religious leaders? Do you trust your scientists, academia? In fact, you don't trust anybody. Why? This is extremely disturbing because it's trust which makes the world go round. It's one of the most important factors that has historically differentiated the Western society from the developing world. And when I look at the whole scenario globally, I find that there's a systemic meltdown. And the people do not trust the system. The biggest example of this was the election of President Trump. Half of the nation believed that he is misogynist, he is a racist, he is a collaborator with Russia to subvert the democracy. He's anti-Muslim or wants to protect the country from the incoming of the Muslims from all over the world. He's greedy and is using the office to enrich himself. And when media, in whom people should have trust, repeats these falsehoods day in and day out, when they're told that the society is inherently racist, that the white people are racist even if they are unconsciously so, that the words DNA and the police have become infected with racism because they're arrested at a higher rate, forgetting that's quite possible that not everybody is racist. And yet, we believe the worst. This has two reasons. One, that these institutions have persistently betrayed that trust laid in them. The judges have been bought. The police, the law and order is under the thumb of the political leadership. The media, which is supposed to be the fourth estate and the defender of all other institutions, and a sort of ombudsman, public's ombudsman, is no better than a prostitute. So why do we trust? Imagine what's the effect of being told that the justice system is racist. because the blacks get too much of punishment, and that if you go to the jails are more full of blacks than the whites. The teachers are suspected to be racist because the children of the minorities get suspended at a higher rate than the children of the whites. This whole thing is going berserk. And a few days back, I was reading an article in Guardian. The article is, why can't we trust the academic journals to tell the truth? And can you believe it? 72% of the scientists say that they have fabricated the results to suit their thesis. The Nobel Prize winner, Rajinder Pachori, cooked up the results to say that Himalayan glaciers are melting to prove his point and win the Nobel Prize, because he was told by the political leadership of UNO, prove it and then you can be eligible for the Nobel Prize, and he got it. The religious system is the worst possible system that you can ever imagine. The religious leaders leading a life of opulence rather than of renunciation make a mockery of the trust of the people. Now, coming to the scientists, 15% of the scientists have been proved to be liars. 72% themselves admit that they fabricate the results. 40% of the medical studies in a gold standard peer review were told to be falsehood and lies. Do the cell phones cause cancer? Research comes, yes. After a week, another research comes, no. Whom do you trust? Because all this research is funded by the interest groups, by the industry. And they buy the scientists, buy the research, and as a matter of fact, the report is written even before the research has been conducted. At one time, eating eggs was a taboo. It will raise your LDL. Today, they are recommended. One time, ghee, the clarified butter, was taboo. And now it's being said there's a panacea for all ills. So the political leaders you can't trust. Look at the recently released Paradise Papers. Kings, queens, ministers, business leaders, all have been embroiled in unsavory deals. So, and then we thought the scientists would be honest, they cannot be trusted. Judges have been openly bought. Army has been betrayed. So really, is there anything that can resonate with the gut feeling of the people? And then you cannot trust the science, then what it is. And that is why this age is very properly called the post-truth age. Today, we are not living in a truth age. In Hindu mythology, there was a time which was called Satya Yug, the age of truth. Today, they call it Kali Yug, the age of destruction. But I'll call it the age of untruth, or a post-truth age. Imagine, do you think? I'm amazed when the people come up with the stupid theories. Richmond Edelman came up that our system with economic and societal fears and the loss of trust is because of populism. No. Loss of trust doesn't lead to populism. It leads to anarchy and tyranny. When the populism runs rampant, history shows that tyranny is not far behind. What happened in French Revolution, what happened in Russian Revolution is a fact of history. Dictatorial leaders are a natural consequence of populism and the lack of trust. People say, okay, he's corrupt, he's dishonest, but okay, he's a good administrator at least. He's as bad as others are as far as the treachery is concerned, but he's at least good in working. And that is why in Pakistan, in 70 years, More than half a century has been under the army rule. So what we need is a new system. We need a new system of trust that can bring happiness, prosperity, and justice. There are solutions to the world's problems, but people need to listen to them and are able to differentiate whom to trust and whom not to trust. Like a well-designed, well-functioning road network, strong institutions empower economies by ensuring a stable environment, smoother transmission mechanism, less costly and less risky economic interaction, a credible set of property rights, respect for rule of law, and due process of law. Today, the due process of law is only in the books. In reality, in an unholy wedlock, the judiciary and the executive decide what to do. And the result is a disaster. The challenge is severe, how to restore trust, but not fatal. Imagine intense competition from provenly new entrants who want to disrupt content and big platforms. This social media, especially Amazon, Facebook, Google, Netflix, Uber, they are disruptive models. They are required. I don't deny it. When you don't have trust in the established system, then the new system would evolve. Nothing can be left in a vacuum. But the adjustment is not there. There is an absolute lack of coordination, and that is why the restrictions are being placed on Facebook, on Twitter, and on other aspects of social media. Then, the education, the teachers have been proved to be rapists and the sexual assaulters. The visible and persistent failure of the education system to adopt exciting technological breakthroughs is a well-known example of breakdown of trust resulting in inertia, and that ultimately results in anarchy. Financial institutions, banks, the way they are cheating, insurance companies, they insure their own goodwill. So there is lack of trust factor all around. And this trust factor, which is the base of any civilized nation, but here the whole world suffers from this. So let's do something. Let's adopt certain norms to ensure the return of trust. Let's be very clear that increasingly ineffective, albeit established approaches, entities, and mindsets have to be thrown on the dung heap. Let's accept it that the external disruptors like Facebook, Amazon, Uber are going to be the underpinnings of the new process and entire business models. The financial, public, and the private interaction is not only for just content, but also willing to revisit the cross-fertilization of best practices. And when the cross-fertilization of the best practices takes place, the trust factor would be brought in slowly. Improved methods of public communication. We don't have the public communication. Less confined information failures, aging channels, prostituted media, mislead people. The latest example, yesterday TPP was signed, Trans-Pacific Partnership. 11 nations signed it because Trump had taken the USA out of it. And what's signed about? They have agreed to do something, but what that something is will be decided at a later stage. So this is the agreement for which 11 prime ministers joined, had a jamboree in Vietnam, and came up with this fantastic statement. We have agreed to have TPP. What TPP shall do, how it shall do, what shall be the scope, that will decide at a later stage. Would the people not be annoyed? Would the people still have trust in this organization? United Nations has always been till now handmaiden of the oppressors. Imagine Saudi Arabia was the chair of the Human Rights Commission. How can you accept it? So the whole system needs to be revamped. Up to now, the influential systems have been lagging in identifying and implementing reforms. The reform is needed today, now, and it must start with restoring the element of trust. Without trust, anything that you do is bound to fail, because skepticism would reign supreme, because people would always be wary of the promises of those people who are tainted. Let the taint be removed. Let the new leadership come. The leadership that is essentially dedicated to the country, to those institutions. And when that happens, or maybe if we don't do it now willingly, nature would have its course. There would be destruction, then like phoenix-like, a new civilization would emerge. The civilization that would have more trust than this post-truth age has. Let post-truth age not be an existential nightmare. Let people learn, let the leadership learn, let the institution learn that devoid of trust factor, they are but gangs. Gangs of pirates and robbers. You don't trust them, but sometimes you do. Those gangs of robbers are sometimes more reliable and honest. So need today is to restore that trust, which has been broken again and again by political leaders, by the executive, by the judiciary, and most important, by the media. At least, let's hope, let each one of us, in our own small way, try to restore the trust, expose the wrongdoing, whatever the cost may be, not for ourselves, but for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.